Tonight, kinesiology, which is so important, as we said, is the major tool that you work with as an instructor. We went through the first two muscles, the serratus anterior and the rhomboids. And as you recall, both of those muscles were shoulder girdle muscles. Now we go on to the third muscle, which falls within that same category of being a shoulder girdle muscle. Trapezius gets its name because of its geometric configuration, the trapezoid. Again, you look at the muscle as we saw the other night, we're only looking at it on one side. But if you saw this muscle on both sides, then you could see where we would have that kind of trapezoid configuration there. Again, notice where the muscle originates. Part of the muscle originates right up here in the back of the skull, called the occipital area. Then you see right here in the thoracic vertebra, superior right down the inferior thoracic vertebra. So that's where the muscle originates. Now when you look at its insertion, we can see over here part of it, the distal end of the clavicle, and that little bony shelf. Little bony shelf that you see there, called the acromion process, which is part of the scapula. And then this sort of spine effect you see here. So it inserts out here, along that spine, and even here close to the medial border.
Excuse me, Dr. Abbott, so you guys, where he lists each one of the muscles, numerically, we're on 5.8. But then, as we told you, he gives you that depiction, like very similar to what you see up on the slide, on 5.24. And number 3, the trapezius, I really had to focus on this because remember, there's the upper, middle, and lower, and they all do different things. So please focus on this. Excuse me, sir.
The trapezius is a superficial muscle, so you can palpate it. Whereas the rhomboids, we looked at the other night, muscle number 2, the rhomboids, that lies deep to the trapezius. You cannot palpate the rhomboids. So we're going to take this muscle and we're going to break it up into 3 sections. Some books may only break it into 2 sections, some books will even break it into 4 different sections. So we're going to break it into 3 sections. We're going to talk about the upper trapezius, the middle trapezius, and the lower trapezius. And as you will see, depending upon which area we're contracting, we can have completely different types of movement of the actual scapula itself. So again, a shoulder girdle muscle because it attaches to the scapula, inserts on the scapula as you see here, as well as the distal end of the clavicle. Remember, the shoulder girdle area was composed of those 2 bones, the clavicle and the scapula. And as we said, any muscle that attaches to the clavicle scapula is involved with its movement or its stabilization is a shoulder girdle muscle. So we're going to first start with the upper trapezius that originates up here from the back of the skull. Comes down and it inserts here on the distal end of the clavicle in that little bony shelf called the acromion process. So again, as we mentioned the other night, when we think of a muscle contracting, remember the line of pull. We pull insertion towards origin. Insertion towards origin. So if I'm going to contract the upper trapezius, I'm pulling my insertion here towards the origin. So when I contract the upper trapezius by itself, we get elevation of the scapula. Elevation. Doing something like a shoulder shrug. Think about that movie, The Hulk. And he had these two great big bumps up here. That's the upper trapezius. Okay. You do something like a shrug. Got a barbell. Shoulder shrug. You're using the upper trapezius because you're elevating that scapula. I might do something like an upright row. I've got a bar, bring it up like this, I have to get elevation of the scapula. So upright row, elevation of the scapula. So doing something like the shoulder shrug, upright row, I am going to be using the upper fibers of the trapezius. Upper fibers. If we look at these middle fibers, look at the middle fibers, think of middle fibers originating here on the superior vertebra within the thoracic region. They then insert here on that spine, sort of the middle of the spine. Again, the concept of line of pull, we're going to pull insertion towards origin. So if we're looking at the origin here, upper thoracic vertebra, we're going to pull insertion towards origin, we are going to get retraction. Retraction. So just like the rhomboids that we looked at on Wednesday night, we talked about the rhomboids are involved with retraction. We also mentioned the rhomboids got involved with downward rotation of the scapula, such as doing a lat pull down exercise or a chin up. When you think of the rhomboids, I want you also to think then of the mid-trapezius. Mid-trapezius works as a retractor, but again, if I am starting in an upwardly rotated position, like reaching up and grabbing a bar to do a chin up, a lat pull down, we have to upwardly rotate that scapula. Therefore, we're putting those middle fibers on stretch. They get involved with downward rotation of the scapula.
And I like it when you review things, like for some people that were not here, and hope Brad and Bruna can come, but they are in Beverly Hills, so they're flying back. But anyway, you guys remember, retraction, he's talking about retraction of the scapula. So this is retraction of the scapula, whereas remember, this is protraction of the scapula.
So what was your principal protractor of the scapula we talked about the other night? First muscle you had.
Serratus anterior, they all said, oh look at, they flew right in from California, it's just like that. Wow. Okay, we're on number 3, you guys, so you got to see retraction and protraction. So that's what protraction, just because all you guys doing bench press, that's protraction. You don't want to know how long it took me to, I felt I had it all done when I had it all back.
Bench press, I do a push-up, anytime.
Yes.
I'm putting my arms in front of me against resistance. I have to contract protractors. And the one you've had so far is the serratus anterior. Serratus anterior. Really, the antagonistic muscle to the serratus anterior was the rhomboids we talked about the other night, because it is a retractor. A retractor. But as we also mentioned, it gets involved with downward rotation. So when we think of the middle trapezius muscle, I want you to think also of the rhomboids. They work together. They work together in retraction, downward rotation of the scapula. Now let's look at these lower fibers. These are the ones that originate on the inferior vertebra in the thoracic region. They insert up here, sort of the beginning of that spine that you see on the scapula right there. So if I'm going to pull insertion towards origin, I am going to be pulling it down. Insertion towards origin. Here's my origin. Insertion. We get depression. So here we have a muscle, one muscle, that gets involved with completely opposite movements of the scapula, depending upon which fibers you contract. Upper fibers are involved with elevation of the scapula. Lower fibers are involved with depression of the scapula. Depression. So when it comes to retraction, seated row. I'm reaching out here, grab a bar, pull it into me, I need retraction. Mid fibers of the trapezius. But when we think of these lower fibers, a dip. Remember in a dip, you start, you're holding one of those parallel bars. So what position are my scapula in when I start a dip?
Elevated.
Elevated.
Guys, kind of do the movements. I do the movements, so I got to do it on myself so I can
So
figure
when
out.
I press myself up and away from the bars, I have to depress the scapula. I have to use these lower fibers of the trapezius. Also, if we are doing something, don't see it here, but a decline press. Remember we talked about presses the other night, we talked about the serratus anterior. We have a flat bench press, we have an incline bench press, and we have a decline bench press. We said by definition incline means head is higher than my legs. Decline, we reverse it. So you'll see these decline benches where a person's head is down and they're grabbing a bar and they're pushing the bar up towards the ceiling. Now, relatively then, when I'm doing a decline press, that bar is going sort of down and out away from me. Imagine I'm head down, pushing that barbell up towards the ceiling. Relatively, I am getting that bar in front, but I am also starting in an elevated position, so I need to get depression.
So when you say relative to the center, to the body, so whenever you say relative to the body, the reference point is always center body?
You have
I need all the help I can get, sir.
You have some equipment out there where you may have an individual sitting in a piece of equipment and he's got a bar and he's pressing it down and away. It's a seated decline press. Seated decline
That's
press. So
easier.
relatively the bar is going in front of me, but I'm pressing it down and away. So when I start, I'm elevated. I need depression of the scapula. I also need some protraction of the scapula, don't I? You'll see a muscle coming up here that gets very much involved with both protraction of the scapula as well as depression. Now, what about an incline press? Remember when we talked about the serratus anterior, we said it not only got involved with protraction, but it got involved with some upward rotation of the scapula. And we said an incline press where I'm pressing a bar away, but I'm also pressing it over my head. The serratus anterior was ideally suited for that because we need protraction. I've got to get my arms in front of me. So that serratus anterior come around the rib cage. But also I need some upward rotation, don't I? That's what the serratus anterior does. It's both a protractor and an upward rotator of the scapula. So we really use that serratus anterior in an incline press. Well, I am getting, why did that happen? Let's see. A timer on that for 15 minutes, so that should not timed out. Okay. I get my arm over my head. What do I have to do to the scapula? Upwardly rotate the scapula. We said before, I look at that scapula, I've got that little bony shelf. If I want to get my arm over my head, but raise my arm to ask a question or do an overhead press, I have to upwardly rotate that scapula so that socket is facing upwardly so I can get my arm over my head. Not only does the serratus anterior work when I'm doing something like that, but put your thinking caps on here. What if I were to contract the upper fibers of the trapezius that insert here and the lower fibers that insert there at the same time? At the same time. Can't you see these upper fibers are going to pull up in that direction? But my lower fibers are going to pull that corner down in that direction. Upward rotation of the scapula.
You guys turn to 5.18, 5.8, 5.18, 5.18 towards the back of the chapter because it gives you specific scapular movements. That really helped me. You'll look at the dot movement. See that, but of course, watch him when he doesn't have the skeleton up here because that really helps. This one is sometimes hard to visualize.
We went over those movements, remember the other night?
Oh, we did?
Oh, yes, we spent time, I showed pictures of it.
I wonder where mine was.
Yes. And we talked about the major movements of the scapula. Elevation, depression, protraction, retraction, upward rotation, downward rotation.
Do you guys
need to
remember
know
that?
those major movements of the scapula, and we're looking at these shoulder girdle muscles that bring about just these kind of actions. So protraction, serratus anterior. Retraction, rhomboids, mid-trapezius. Elevation, upper trapezius. Depression, lower fibers of the trapezius. Upward rotation, serratus anterior, and if I contract my upper trapezius at the same time I contract my lower trapezius, because they insert in different areas, lower inserts there, upper there. Again, this is his concept. My line of pull I am going to be pulling this corner in that direction, this corner in that direction. Therefore, the action we get is upward rotation of the scapula. I want to do a shoulder press, upper and lower trapezius. I want to do an incline press, upper and lower trapezius. I want to ask a question, upper and lower trapezius. Anytime I get my arm over my head, I am going to have to get that upward rotation of the scapula. Can you see that combination? We're inserting there, pulling in that direction. We're inserting there, pulling that corner. So this corner is being pulled in that direction. This corner is being pulled in that direction. They work together to give us upward rotation of the scapula.
That lower corner there, Dr. Abbott?
This is where? This is where my lower fibers insert, right there in the spine. There's a regular spine here. If you look at the scapula again, you can see it here. This is my spine. Here is my sort of outer corner. Here is my inner corner. So upper fibers are pulling this corner up. Lower fibers are pulling this corner down. Here we get upward rotation of the scapula.
Can you guys see it from that side? This is really important to see that movement, Drew.
We can see it. We can see it.
Okay, okay. Okay then.
This corner is being pulled down because this is my area of origin. Lower fibers and trapezius. We pull insertion towards origin, pulling that corner down. This corner, insertion towards origin. We're pulling it up.
Say that one more time because some of us just got it.
Together, it gives you upward rotation of the scapula. Really important if you think of all the kind of overhead activities we do. So if I'm doing an incline press, if I'm doing an overhead press, just to reach a bar, I want to reach up to grab a bar to do a chin-up, to do a lat pull-down, I'm going to have to contract my upper and lower trapezius to reach up and grab that bar. Once I grab that bar, now I start pulling that bar down towards me. I'm getting downward rotation. Now I'm using rhomboids and mid-trapezius. So as I reach up and grab that bar, upper and lower trapezius. As I'm pulling down on that bar, mid-trapezius and rhomboids.
So you see how you had to differentiate the three different parts of the trapezius, okay?
I'm upwardly rotated to reach up and grab that bar. Arm over my head, grab that bar. Rhomboids. When I upwardly rotate, can't you see they're going on stretch, aren't they?
Yeah.
So when they contract, they also get involved with downward rotation of the scapula, working in conjunction with middle fibers of the trapezius. Middle fibers. If I am protracted, middle fibers of the trapezius, rhomboids, retract. Pull the scapula. It's really important to visualize. You're going to hear me say this a number of times. You cannot understand the muscular system by trying to memorize what muscles work with a given exercise, because there's an infinite number of exercises that you can do out there. But if you understand where these muscles are located, where they originate, where they insert, where they cross a joint, then you can visualize what's going to happen. And until you can visualize the muscular system, you can't understand the muscular system. And this is a problem we see over and over again. You'll walk into a facility and someone will say, well, with this exercise we're working these muscles. Why? Well, because that's what someone told me. You can walk into a facility and you can see pictures on a machine that will highlight muscles, saying these muscles are working, when in fact those muscles do not work. They're inhibited. They're inhibited. Even in that book that we mentioned you get, Strength Training Anatomy, there are some erroneous pictures in there which indicates a muscle is working when in fact it's not working. Again, unlimited number of exercises. But if you can look at any exercise and figure out where the resistance is coming from, what kind of skeletal movement is required to overcome that resistance, what muscles lie in a position when they contract and apply a pulling action on the bones will bring about that kind of joint movement. That's when you are understanding how the muscular system works. As a trainer, you have to design balanced programs for people out there. And you can't do that unless you understand how the muscular system works. You've got to visualize it. Now, I know some people, visualization comes a lot easier. You know, auditory learners, visual learners, tactile learners. But even though you may not be typically a visual learner, and it takes a while, usually what happens is over a period of time, it suddenly, you know, it makes sense. It's like, could have had a V8. Now it makes sense. You know, and then you can have fun looking at any kind of human movement, and you can figure out which muscles work. Because to be a competent instructor, you have to be able to look at any kind of activity and figure out the muscular involvement. Or if you know there's certain muscles you need to work, you need to know what kind of activity you have to do to work those muscles. You work with a trainer and you pick up a client. Maybe that client has a specific sport or activity. Maybe that individual does competitive slalom skiing down here on the water. You should be able to analyze that movement, I mean starting at the foot right on up, and be able to determine what muscles are working in the ankle joint, in the knee joint, in the hip joint, in the back, the shoulder girdle area, the shoulder joint, the elbow joint. And you determine by looking at that activity all the kind of skeletal movements you have, and therefore the muscle involvement you're going to have with that activity. Then in addition to knowing the muscles that are working, you have to say, okay, when that person's competing, what is the primary energy system they're using? Am I working primarily with the phosphagen system, the lactic acid system, or the aerobic system? So then you've determined the muscles that are to be worked, but then you have to determine that you will provide an activity that works those muscles with the appropriate energy system. Appropriate energy system. Okay? Again, this is a point we drive home again as you get into the strength and conditioning course. Question? Yeah.
Okay, since trunk gets, the thoracic region gets involved with rotation, right? And the origin of the trap muscles.
Right now, we're not talking rotation here.
I know,
We're going to get into rotation later. Now, you mean upper rotation of the scapula or downward rotation?
I'm talking like if you're doing a twist, right?
Okay.
That origin will move towards insertion.
Oh, yes. But we haven't gotten here. When we start talking about oblique muscles, then you're going to have to know what muscles are involved when I'm rotating to the right or left against resistance. Okay? So, doing an incline press, shoulder press, I've got to get my arms over my head. I'm going to be contracting upper fibers of the trapezius along with lower fibers of the trapezius. Here you see an upright row, elevation. Don't do that. How often do you see people in a gym? Remember, we said before, if my palm is facing down, doing a lateral raise with a dumbbell, that's as high as I go. Parallel to the ground with my arms, remember? Arm, forearm.
So parallel to the ground is 90 degrees, sir?
I'm 90 degrees there if I'm standing up, but it's horizontal to the ground. Once you get above that,
Ouch.
we showed you pictures before where you start to jam that subdeltoid bursa. You can end up with bursitis. Granted, some people can do this, may get away with it. A lot of people can't. It's an invitation. Because if you think about it, when you grab the bar, she's grabbing the bar, I grab the bar. Remember we talked about medial and lateral rotation of the shoulder joint? Are you medially or laterally rotated when I grab the bar like this?
Medial.
Medial rotation. So think of it this way. Take your arm up like that. You go up, you get a jamming effect there, don't you?
Yeah.
Remember, to get your arm over your head, you have to
Lateral.
laterally rotate the shoulder joint to get your arm over the head. Because you've got this projection, a little bony projection you see there. Binding action. When I rotate, laterally rotate, then I can free it up. So this is not an exercise you want to do. An upright row where you go above. You see machines out there, lateral raise machines. It's as high as you go. Now there are some lateral raise machines out there that have a roller pad on it. And I could do this. I could laterally rotate the shoulder joint and then I could go higher. But if you're in this position, you're immediately rotated. That's as high. You don't go above. Don't go above horizontal.
Like you're saying, some people can, some of us are predisposed to different things. Now, I can because all mine was removed, it's gone, but even if you think you're double jointed, don't do it.
You will see most physical therapists out there will tell people, don't even do an upright row. Why do it? There are safer ways of working the muscles that you want to work here. Okay, so upright row, you get elevation. Once I do go above horizontal, then I also have to get some upward rotation of the scapula. So you will see elevation and upward rotation will be combined. Will be combined.
Or would you say that one more time? We'll see what will be combined?
Elevation and upward rotation. When I get involved with something like an overhead press or incline press, you will see in addition to that, we get some elevation too. Elevation and upward rotation. They'll work together. Work together. Okay? Trapezius muscle. Here you see a shoulder press. Notice how is she spotting it. We talked about grips the other night. What kind of grip are we looking at?
Alternate grip.
Alternate grip. You'll go into a gym and you'll see people spotting like this all the time. Something like a bench press or even this, spotting like that, or they're spotting like that. You always use an alternate grip. Why do we use an alternate grip? We went over this the other night. One hand is tending to turn the bar in one direction, the other the opposite direction. So they counteract, they sort of neutralize. There's that word again, neutralize, we talked about the other night. They neutralize each other. If you look at any power lifter, when they do a deadlift, how do they grab the bar? Always have an alternate grip. When you're spotting, you should have an alternate grip. And that's what you see here using. Again, if you're going to be sitting for NSCA later on, you will see videos, and you're going to see videos with mistakes being made, and you have to pick up the mistakes.
And Ingrid's going to be taking it.
In real life.
Could you describe what happens if you don't use an alternate grip?
It's easier to lose control of the bar. Have it.
I like it when you say what happens. So let's say that you have someone that doesn't know any better and they're just spotting like this. And like say if it was me spotting you when you're doing a bench press. And then
Jane, that is something to do with the base of support.
Okay.
I know what you're
Okay.
getting into. Okay. We say that for the strength condition because we spend time talking about how to spot foot positions and things of that nature. But it is true what Jane was sort of alluding to here. When you watch most people spot, don't they have their feet sort of not right together, but about the same distance?
You're right in the light and
Yeah,
it's
don't
turning
do it
around.
that way. One foot's in front of the other, staggered stance. Yeah. Because if I don't stagger my stance, even though I may have the right grip, if someone loses it, they're not only going to get the bar, they're going to get me on top of them as well.
And maybe some people like that. I'm sorry. Okay.
So your feet are further apart, you got a wider base of support, they're staggered, so you have, greater base of support, that anterior posterior. Well, we also talked about the sagittal plane the other night, remember? Talked about the sagittal plane, same as the anterior posterior plane, versus the frontal or coronal plane on the side, horizontal transverse plane. So I know there were some people who missed last Wednesday night, which was really important, and try to get together with someone else, maybe someone who has, been recording it.
I have it on
I'll
YouTube.
tell you, that first session we
I have it on
had,
YouTube if you guys want it, but it's private. I have to share it, so whoever wants it, I can give you. I'll send it by email.
Wait, just a minute, honey, you didn't get a models release. Okay, there's gonna be litigation here. Just,
Well, it is private.
I'm gonna show you private. I'll talk to you. No, that would be good, if you could, because there are, how many, miss, I know three.
Yes, please, sir.
1, 2, 3.
Well, you will see, in fact, if you get videos from NSCA, you'll see a lot of lifts that are done. You'll see pictures of these later on where you can see through them. The idea is they're nice for training purposes, and you can, you know, your view is not completely blocked by a solid plate.
Are those still 45?
Well, the bar can be a 45-pound bar, but also you can get a bar that looks like an Olympic bar there that may be a aluminum bar at 15 pounds. So for training purposes, you may have a bar which is a lot lighter. It may look like a typical Olympic bar. We have Olympic bars, we have power bars. Typically they're 45 pounds. There is a difference though between an Olympic bar and a power bar. They are tempered differently. An Olympic bar has flex to it. If you watch an Olympic lifter, when they first start that lift, they're down there, when they're coming up, you will see that bar is bending down like that. But then due to the momentum, you will see as they get that bar up there, it bends in the opposite direction because of the actual momentum. In fact, an Olympic lifter gets to the point where they get that bar moving, they take advantage of that momentum, and then they literally pull themselves underneath the bar. When it's at that point where literally it doesn't weigh anything. In fact, if anything, we call it a throwaway effect. What happens if you're doing a bench press and you really like that? You could sort of let go of that bar for an instant, it would go a little bit on its own. That throwaway effect.
Don't do it.
Well, that's what Olympic lifters rely upon. When they get down there, you'll see pictures of it later on. That bar has momentum, and then they literally pull themselves under the bar and catch the bar that way. Get that bar moving, and then they pull on the bar to pull themselves underneath the bar and catch the bar. So, an Olympic bar has flex to it. A power bar does not have that same kind of flex. They both weigh 45 pounds. But for training purposes, you can get bars that look like a typical Olympic bar, but it may be aluminum, it may only be about 15 pounds. 15 pounds. Then you can have rubber plates. Rubber plates may only weigh something like 10 pounds. You even have plastic plates. So they use that for training purposes.
Show people moves and stuff.
You will see a bar like this has ball bearings out here so that the bar rotates inside. See this thicker portion that you've got out there? If you look at some of these bars, they get stuck after a while. They get rusted, ball bearings don't work. An Olympic lifter, when you watch an Olympic lifter and they snap the wrist like that, if that bar does not rotate inside, then you get that momentum going, you can end up breaking your wrist right here. So you have to make sure that that bar itself rotates inside this piece that you see right there.
Is that how an actual shoulder press is supposed to look like? How come?
I'm sorry,
Is there different ways to do shoulder press?
I don't follow the question.
She said, is that the way the shoulder press is supposed to look like, or are there different ways to do a shoulder press?
Because she's going like really low, and I thought you were supposed to go like right here, like all the way down here.
Well,
So
you may
like-
start a person a little bit higher,
Yeah.
but eventually we can increase the range of motion.
Okay.
But
Is it better to do
you
that?
usually get down, and this particular type of device itself, the post you see, it's really important that you have a spotter here that can help you lift that bar off of the posts, the racks. Because you'll see people, if they get in this device and they don't have a spotter, they have to overly laterally rotate the shoulder joint to pick up that bar, pick up that weight. And this is where they can end up with some serious problems, shoulder problems.
But you're right, Bernie, everything is progressive. Some people don't have that much of a range of motion, and you'll work towards that. All right, we're just doing the basics here. He goes into great detail in the strength and conditioning class, correct, students?
By the way, what do you call, you see this kind of spring effect out there, what do we call that out there? That's a lock. How often do you hear gym people call it a collar? It's not a collar. The collar is on the inside. That's the collar right there. So you'll see some people may put other kind of locking mechanisms, and you'll hear them refer to a collar. It's not a collar. It's called a lock.
You're responsible for that in the strength and conditioning, but not in this class.
Just like the roughened area you have in there, you'll be responsible for the name of that.
And we know that.
Okay,
Nearly.
so shoulder press. I'm going to be using, yes, serratus anterior is involved with the shoulder girdle area, but you're using upper and lower fibers of the trapezius to get that upward rotation of the scap. Okay. Deltoids. Now, the first three muscles we looked at, serratus anterior, rhomboids, trapezius, are all shoulder girdle muscles because they insert on the scapula involved with movement of the scapula. Now we're looking at a muscle called the deltoids. And you see the way it inserts on the humerus, the arm here, humerus. It creates movement of the humerus in relationship to that socket. And this is what we refer to as the shoulder joint. Shoulder joint. So, any muscle that attaches to my arm creates this kind of movement here in the shoulder joint is referred to as a shoulder joint muscle. Shoulder joint muscle. So this is our deltoids. It gets its name because of its delta configuration. Think it may be something like a delta wing, or geographically, if you look at a river comes down and then it spreads out, like a river is coming down and then it spreads out into a delta. Delta. Sort of a triangular shape there. Now when we look at the deltoid muscle, we see fibers up here on the distal end of the clavicle. There's your clavicle, distal end. We also see it on that little bony shelf that you have in the scapula. Right on back to the spine. Right on back into the spine. Typically, you'll hear people refer to the deltoid and break it up into three different areas. They'll talk about the anterior head, middle head, and posterior head. Now, in reality, there are more than three heads. In fact, we showed you before, this is a multi-pinnate muscle. Remember we talked about unipinnate, bipinnate, multi-pinnate muscle. And you look at some people, well-defined deltoids, and you can see multiple sections. But in general, we talk about an anterior deltoid, middle, sometimes people refer to it as the lateral head of the deltoid, or the posterior head of the deltoid. Now, all three heads, basically, of the deltoid are crossing the shoulder joint on top. But the anterior head also is crossing it to the front, anteriorly, posterior to the rear, posteriorly. If I do a lateral raise, this is where you think of people working the deltoid, they've got a dumbbell and they do a lateral raise. Are you working all three heads? If I'm standing upright and I'm doing a lateral raise that way, do you work all three heads? No, you don't. It's a problem you see quite often in the gym. Most people, when they go in to do a lateral raise, they're standing perfectly upright, bringing arms up on that, what do we call that plane?
Pattern. Wait a minute.
Frontal, coronal plane, frontal coronal plane. Typically, most people, due to the configuration of deltoids, are working in the middle and the anterior head, but they really don't get much work in the posterior head. Ideally, when you do a lateral raise, you should not be perfectly upright. You should be bent forward a little bit. And in that case, you can get all three heads of the deltoid at the same time. You're putting the brunt of the work, though, on the middle head of the deltoid. The other thing is, if you think about it, if you bring it up straight to the side, may feel a little bit of awkwardness. What if I bring my arm up about 30 degrees to the front? It's more comfortable, isn't it? Now, we talked about 3 planes of movement. Sagittal plane, also called the anterior, posterior plane. The coronal or frontal plane, we talked about the horizontal or transverse plane. Now, throwing another name at you, you're not responsible for it in this course. You will be in the strength and conditioning. We call it the scaption plane. The reason we call it that is when you look at your scapula, can't you see that if I follow that angle of the scapula, that is the normal range of motion. It's a lot more comfortable. It's a lot safer than doing it strictly to the side. So, by bending forward a little bit, bend the knees, keep the back straight, coming up on that scaption plane, which is about 30 degrees off of the frontal or coronal plane, you can work all 3 heads at the same time. And it's a lot safer. And the majority of the time, you're going to watch people in a gym, and they're standing upright, and bringing it straight up to the side on that coronal or frontal plane. And you will not see all 3 heads working. Frank, can I borrow you for a second since you've got that shirt on?
Sure.
Wait, excuse me, Dr. Abbott, I've already done the people that want to volunteer. Jeremy wants to volunteer, so leave that alone, he just flew in.
Well, the reason, Jane,
Sir,
the shirt he's wearing is perfect for this.
I know how to help them take their shirts off, Dr. Abbott. Okay?
Okay.
He's in.
Okay, we're going to take a look at his deltoid.
You know what, Dr. Abbott, it's because, you know what, he just had a biopsy, so we're gonna have Jeremy sitting up there.
No, sorry, that's all right.
You don't care?
Shouldn't hurt his shoulder.
Don't, all right, but just don't touch
Okay.
your crest too hard.
If you're perfectly upright.
And excuse me, could you get him
Perfectly
out of the light, because you're in front of the light, it hurts
Okay.
our eyes.
you're gonna be
Keep going.
Perfectly upright like this. You're going to bring it directly to the side as we normally would. Take your arm up against it. I'm going to hold some resistance. Yeah, take it up. See the anterior, middle is sticking out? Now, I'm going to flip around a little bit here. Again, up against resistance. What's happening there? That's the posterior head. Is it working? Not working. Middle headed. In fact, you can even see some different sections within the middle head. And that anterior head is really working. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is just bend forward. Keep the back straight. Bend forward. Arm is going to come up. Again, take it up against resistance. See what's happening now?
Yeah.
Now we're getting posterior head, middle head, and anterior. All 3 heads are working at the same time. Okay? Thank you.
Oh,
Good
I
stuff.
could have helped palpate it, Doctor. Sorry, Bruna. All right.
But it's nice now and then when, and we'll do this again with some other muscles too.
Wait, Christian,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Stefan had a
What
question.
about if you isolate one at a time?
Oh yeah, when we do a front raise, then we're really targeting,
And
that's we're gonna get to
side and
the anterior deltoid. But when we think of a normal lateral raise, most people think of working the deltoid, they think they're working all 3 heads. Typically you don't unless you do what we did there. Angle forward a little bit, about 30 degrees off of that, got that coronal frontal plane. You get all 3 heads working at the same time. Now, so a lot of different exercises where we're using it. You can see again its area of insertion right here. In fact, on the humerus we have a little bump, in fact you will see this. Tuberosities or tubercles are little bony projections and they serve as anchoring points on the skeletal system. You can see again where it's originating out here in the distal end of the clavicle on that little bony ledge called the acromion process, and also on that spine, So a number of different exercises where we use the deltoids. So again, a lateral raise, that's what we were just doing, a lateral raise. Ideally, angle forward, 30 degrees off, and that's what you're doing, coming up to parallel, horizontal, horizontal. What if I do a bent over raise? Well, I am bending over like this. What am I targeting then?
Posterior.
Posterior head's in a position. My anterior head is going to be inhibited. It's not working. Not working. Now, talk about an upright and regular rowing. If I'm doing, like the picture you saw before, an upright row, ideally you should be getting, doing it correctly, lean forward a little bit, you ought to be getting all three heads.
You don't take it any higher than here.
But you don't take it higher, you don't go above, parallel with the ground. And ideally you can get all three heads. Again, angle forward a little bit. Don't be perfectly upright like this. Angle forward, angle forward. Get all three heads.
So you get some sharp workout too. Little elevation.
Oh, yeah. In fact, if you think about it, my scapula, clavicle, are the bones from which this muscle is pulling. That's where the muscle originates. So, when I do that exercise, when I put a weight in my hand, I do a lateral raise, and my scapula want to drop down. So I stabilize it with my upper trapezius. Upper trapezius will stabilize the scapula, so I've got a stable platform from which my deltoids can work to abduct the shoulder joint. If I'm doing a regular rowing, if I reach out and I grab a bar and I'm pulling in against resistance, what's working in my deltoids?
Anterior.
Posterior. My anterior is going to be inhibited. Will not be working. My anterior deltoid wants to bring my arm across in horizontal flexion or horizontal adduction. Remember those terms from the other night? My posterior deltoid wants to take my arm back in horizontal abduction, even into horizontal hyperextension. So when I do a regular rowing activity, my posterior deltoid is working, my anterior deltoid inhibited. Now, when we think of doing bench presses, again, we talk about a flat bench, an incline, and a decline. When I do a flat bench, relatively, if I've got a bar, I'm going straight out like that. Anterior deltoid's working. If I do a decline, relatively, to the front and down, anterior deltoid is still working. If I do an incline, again, anterior deltoid. So your anterior deltoid is going to work on all three of those bench presses. Flat, incline, decline. Your posterior will be what? Inhibited. Not be working. It will interfere with that action if we're contracting. We do a shoulder or overhead press. I want you to think about this. This is abduction, right? And typically when we think of abduction, we're thinking of all the deltoids. I'm standing upright, primarily middle anterior. But what if I'm going to do an overhead press? What do I have to do an overhead press?
Adduction.
Immediately.
I have to do, kind of move that shoulder joint. Lateral rotation. So now my anterior deltoid is on top. It's in a position to AB, to abduct. My posterior deltoid, it's in a position to adduct. So when I do an overhead press, my anterior deltoid is working, but my posterior deltoid is inhibited. And yet you'll walk into a lot of gyms and you'll look at a machine, it's an overhead press machine, and they will color in all three heads of the deltoids. Your posterior head does not work. Does not work.
Make sure you can visualize that, you guys, because he did the lateral rotation. Do you have a question, Jeremy, or are you doing the?
What if you do the Arnold press?
Lateral raise like that.
Arnold press.
The Arnold press?
Oh, where you've got your dumbbells,
Here.
you're
Here.
doing it like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Instead, I have to abduct to get my arm over my head, abduction. But in order to do that, I have to what? I have to laterally rotate. It puts my anterior deltoid on top. So if I am doing a shoulder press, I laterally rotate, my anterior is on top, posterior in position to AD, adduct. Brett, can we use again with his
Are you
this
working
type
all the
of.
heads on that one? Or no?
Because when you're starting like this, what's the difference for, they call it the Arnold, okay?
What's the rationale for doing this? Well, anterior deltoid is going to be working. But when I come over here, my anterior deltoid works. There's no real rationale for doing that exercise that I can see.
All the fuck.
Yeah. I mean, people will come up with some bizarre movements, but you say, wait a minute, what am I really looking when I'm doing
You're
an
setting a little
overhead?
bit of chest into it, I imagine, right?
What?
You're setting a little bit of chest, you got a little bit of the upper chest going on the
So you're adding a
on the
little
upper,
bit
but
of
if you bring it
chest.
around, you're still using a little bit of chest, and I think that's what we're trying to do.
Well, he's just storing
this
this one.
Well, it's just a little chest.
Yeah.
You're starting in this position, right? But you're not gonna go up like that completely, are you? Keeping your hands together.
No, you just,
Yeah. But you're turning right into an overhead or shoulder press. I don't see a rationale for doing that.
Because it looks
If your shoulders are tight, sometimes it's kind of hard to get started here, so it's easier to be out here and then you rotate out.
But this is done with dumbbells. You
It's
can't
done with
use it
dumbbells, you
obviously
can't
with a
use
barbell.
Right.
Well, Arnold used to do, so gotta be cool.
Oh, really? They're doing it.
When you
Okay.
come in, squeeze the pectoral.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, chest,
Right.
chest.
You'd have to
You
consciously,
come in like that.
Wait till we get to the pecs,
wait.
okay? Because I'm sorry, but that's,
Versus turning as you go like that.
it's like people you will see in an aerobic dance class and they've got heavy hands and the instructor is telling them to come in like this and what do they say? Oh, you're working your pecs. You're not working your pecs. Where's the resistance? Zero resistance. You're still working this.
Unless you squeeze.
Unless you squeeze. We'll talk about that later on, something called muscular co-contraction. Okay, but looking at the deltoid here. Again, why don't you get over here a little bit now? I'll put the light. Can you all see his? Again, if he's perfectly upright, as we said before, remember pressing up overhead. Inhibited, but working. Now, is he angled forward? Remember angle as you did before? Up here, take it up. Now you can see the posterior is kicking in, but still working anterior middle head. You can see a nice division actually in this middle deltoid. Now, if he does an overhead press, he has to laterally rotate. He's pressing overhead, press overhead. What's happened to the posterior? It's mush. It's inhibited. Can't work. Anterior. But what if he now press down? Can you see now posterior is working? What's happening in the anterior? Inhibited. Inhibited. Okay? Thank you. So I have to laterally rotate and grab a bar to do an overhead press. Overhead press. My anterior deltoid is on top. That's what's going to be working here. Posterior is going to be inhibited. But if I happen to do something like a lat pull down or a chin up, I'm laterally rotated when I grab that bar. Now my posterior deltoid's in a position to adduct. My anterior, as you can see there, it was inhibited. Not working. Okay? So, shoulder overhead press. Anterior deltoid. Anterior deltoid. Plugged in. How's that going off? Okay. Flies. Dumbbell. Be lying flat on my back. Flat bench fly. I could be on an incline, doing an incline fly. I could be in a head down position decline, doing a decline fly. Just like with a bench press, when we talk about a flat, incline, or decline, if you are doing flies, that anterior deltoid is in the position where it's going to be working. Now, if I do a front raise, person has a dumbbell, bring it up to the front. What's working? Anterior deltoid. Your posterior deltoid is inhibited. So anterior deltoid by itself wants to flex the shoulder joint. Posterior deltoid, when it contracts, it is going to pull me down an extension of the shoulder joint. Extension. if we do a lat pull down, as we said before, reach up, grab the bar, posterior deltoids in position, do the work. A front pull down, sometimes you hear the gym referred to as a Dickerson exercise. You heard that term? Dickerson. You've got that bar out here, and you're doing a front pull down. What's working the deltoids?
Posterior.
Posterior. Anterior is inhibited, posterior is in position to bring it down.
So with the lat pull down, the posterior works because you're extending the.
I have laterally rotated the shoulder joint. My posterior deltoid's in a position to adduct, to pull that humerus down and adduction of the humerus.
Dr. Abbott, could you just demonstrate quickly for us again, because it's sometimes difficult to visualize in the shoulder joint. Could you demonstrate
Front.
again flexion of the shoulder joint and extension, and then demonstrate the Dickerson
Okay.
for front pull down? Okay, you guys watch carefully because this is hard
I'm
to
on,
focus on it.
what's the plane that I'm working on? Sagittal plane. This by definition is flexion of the shoulder joint. This by definition is? What if I stop here and I say, what position are you in? Shoulder joint flexion. This, remember, we said was abduction of the shoulder joint. The opposite of that was AD. But if I stop, what position am I in? I'm abducted. Remember, we said don't confuse movement with the actual position. If I have a dumbbell and I'm doing shoulder joint flexion with a dumbbell, we call that a front raise. I'm raising the weight to the front. I might have a bar, like a lat pull down bar, but instead of here, what if I hold a bar in front of me? I'm doing a front pull down. Again, you'll hear it referred to as a Dickerson exercise in the gym. Technically call it a front pull down exercise. Front pull down, I am working what?
Posterior deltoids.
Posterior deltoid. Anterior is inhibited. Front raise, anterior is working, posterior. I'm not going to let Brent go to sleep because I'm going to keep jumping him up all the time.
Oh, boy.
One more time.
Bruno is being very kind.
Yeah. No, but he's a perfect model.
I know, but he's exhausted. They
Good
just
muscular
flew back in.
development.
We're still jet lagged.
And you can really see his deltoids. Yeah, I'm going to face the class. You're going to do a front raise. Front raise. You see what's happening there? Anterior is really working. Now, I'm going to flip him around. Get him dizzy here. Front raise again. Coming up. But what's happening to the posterior? Inhibit. Well, what if he's doing a front pull down? Press down now. Now keep the arm straight. Straight, straight. See the way the posterior is really working now. Then we flip him around. Again, Dickerson, what's happening in the anterior? Inhibited. Inhibited. Okay? Until the next time. You're going to find as we go through a lot of these muscles that sometimes it really helps if you get together with someone in the gym and be careful, you don't want to get injured in the process, but palpate, feel muscles as someone is working.
With special permission.
Yes.
Thank you. A mom's release.
Female, you see some guy you'd like to get a little closer to, and say, do you mind if I palpate you while you're exercising?
Dr. Abbott, don't lead these students astray. I apologize, students. You've never acted like this before. Why you beg?
So, pull over. That's an old free weight exercise where you would see people lying on their back and they had a barbell and they were back here and they would pull it over. You don't see that being done very much anymore because you're only really working the initial range of motion. But we have pull-over machines now. You'll sit down in a machine and you typically have your elbows against a pad and you are doing that. You are doing extension of the shoulder joint against resistance. What deltoid is working? Posterior deltoid is working. Called a pull-over machine. A lot of other muscles are working too. I'm just talking about the deltoid at the moment. Later on, we're going to start bringing them in, so we'll give you an exercise, and we're going to say what's working in the shoulder girdle, shoulder joint, and elbow joint. You need to understand them all. So, That's a pullover. Here you see a lateral raise. Okay. Again, he is standing perfectly upright, going to the horizontal, mostly anterior, middle head. Get all three heads at the same time. As you saw before, you're going to need to angle forward a little bit. It's a lot safer if you come about 30 degrees off of that frontal or coronal plane, so you are lined up with the actual angle of the scapula. That's why we call that the scaption plane. Scaption plane. Here he's doing an overhead shoulder press. Therefore, he has to laterally rotate the shoulder joint, really putting that anterior deltoid on top. That's doing the work. That's doing the work. Posterior deltoid, going to be inhibited.
What's happening with the medial head? Inhibited also.
You'll see some action on the medial, but more sort of the anterior fibers of the middle head. Okay. Another shoulder joint muscle, latissimus dorsi. Backside, remember, is the dorsal aspect of the body. This muscle, a lot of width or a lot of latitude. Think of the map, longitude, latitude. All these, latitude. You get the word latissimus dorsi.
And excuse me, you guys, remember he gave you the groupings for the shoulder groupings? So on page 5.5 where you see shoulder joint, so now we've got the deltoids, we've got the latissimus dorsi that we're doing now. You have to make sure you differentiate the shoulder joint from the shoulder girdle. We've got the first three shoulder girdle muscles when we get to the pec minor, so just make sure you know deltoid, latissimus dorsi, which he's going to refer to as lats, is a shoulder joint muscle. Okay, back to the page where the bottom of
See the way this muscle inserts on the humerus, therefore creating movement of the actual shoulder joint. Notice it originates on sort of these inferior vertebrae, the thoracic region, right down into the lumbar region, and even into the sacrum itself. Sometimes, some people, you may even see an attachment, a little bit of attachment on this portion of the pelvis, the ilium, as well as sometimes even in those last three ribs or costals. But it inserts on the humerus. It inserts anteriorly. So that's what you see with sort of this inset picture here. We're looking at an anterior view of the shoulder joint there, and you see its area of insertion. So the latissimus dorsi muscle attaches to these inferior vertebrae, thoracic region, lumbar, sacrum, by means of a large sheet of connective tissue called an aponeurosis. It serves as a tendon. It's called aponeurosis. Aponeurosis. Now, basic movements you have of the shoulder joint, I want you to think of. If an individual is doing adduction, like a lat pull-down exercise, adduction, that muscle's in a position to adduct the shoulder joint. If I'm doing that front pull down or that Dickerson exercise, I'm up here, pulling down like that. That front pull down, I am getting extension of the shoulder joint. Lats works there, along with the posterior deltoid we just talked about. But my lats gets involved with extension of the shoulder joint. If I'm up here and then I get horizontal abduction or horizontal extension, my lats get involved with that. So my lats are involved with horizontal abduction, extension, and anywhere in between. Anywhere in between. And also with adduction itself. So a lot of different ranges of motion we have with the lats muscle. If I'm doing a chin-up or a pull-up, I have to reach up, grab that bar. I need to do adduction of the shoulder joint. I'm working my lats along with what fibers of the deltoid. Push head of the deltoid. Posterior head. Posterior head. Pull-over exercise. Again, we really don't see people doing the old pull-over with a barbell, but pull-over machine I do a pullover exercise. Elbows up there against that pad, I'm driving down like that, I'm getting extension. My lats are involved. Extending the shoulder joint. Front pull down. Dickerson. Extension of the shoulder joint. Lats are involved, along with the posterior head of the deltoid. Now, I'm doing a rowing exercise. I'm out here and I grab a bar. I'm pulling in against resistance. My lats are working. This is a pronated grip. What if I have a neutral grip? Now I'm getting extension. Lats are working. What if I have a semi-pronated grip we talked about the other night? So isn't this sort of halfway in between extension and horizontal abduction? My lats are still working. Anywhere in between there, my lats are working. Lats are working.
Different fibers of the.
Yes, my pants will stay up.
Oh, boy.
Okay?
Watch out, I'm staying over here.
Now, how do we know what fiber? Why? You'll go to some of these rowing machines and it gives you an option. I have a pronated grip, I have a neutral grip, I have a semi-pronated grip. You will see that not only with a seated rowing machine, but maybe I've got something like that T-bar row where you bend over. You've got that bar coming up between you and you've got a pronated grip, a neutral grip, and a semi-pronated grip. We have different grips because it changes the range of motion. That changes where I'm putting my emphasis on the lats muscle. And if you're a personal trainer, you need to understand some of the subtleties. Why do I do one exercise versus another exercise? A muscle pulls most efficiently when it is pulling perpendicular to the bone to which it attaches. Muscle is pulling most efficiently. Perpendicular.
That's important to remember for the next class, but so perpendicular, that means at a not, well, perpendicular
90
to the
degrees
bone.
to the bone to which it
90
attaches.
degrees, guys, always remember that. If you take an NSCA, you have to know that.
Now,
Perpendicular 90 degrees to
look
the
at
bone.
here's my lats, lower fibers. Can you see when I'm doing something like a lat pull down, these lower fibers, can't you see the way they're pulling? They pull the arm straight down. But what if I went to these upper fibers of the lats? Do they want to pull the arm straight down? No. They want to pull it back, don't they? So, if I'm doing a seated row and I'm using a pronated grip, the reason we use a pronated grip, because now I'm really targeting these upper fibers that pull that humerus back with that horizontal abduction or horizontal extension. If I do a front pull down exercise though, these lower fibers in a position to pull down. Do this with a belt sometime, and by pulling you can see the kind of movement you get when you apply that pulling action on the arm.
Doctor, the front pull down is the same like this, right?
Yeah.
But could I do the same like this? You know when
Yeah.
you do the front pull down?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Because I'm still getting extension of the shoulder joint. Extension of the
Sometimes
shoulder.
we do heavier this way.
Well, people will do a lat pull down this way. In fact, you're going to be stronger in that position than if you do it that way. Ever notice if you do pull-ups, chin-ups, can't you do more in a supinated
yeah.
grip than you can in pronated grip? We've changed our range of motion here too, haven't we? But now we're going to be getting into some other muscles we haven't gotten to yet when we start looking at elbow flexors. But if I do a typical lat pull down exercise, I could do it that way, I could do it this way. I have elbow flexors involved, don't I? What if I do the Dickerson now? Do I use my elbow flexors?
No.
No.
When I do a regular lats exercise, what gives out first? Your lats give out first? Your arms. Aren't they the weak link in the chain?
Even you, Marco, honey, your 21-inch biceps give out first, don't be
But
touched.
if I do a front pull down, I'm basically taking my elbow flexors out of the picture. Now, if I'm doing a lat pull down this way or this way, and I've got a fair number of plates in that weight stacker,
Thank you.
and then I go to do a front pull down, you're going to have to pull that pin and put fewer plates on here, but you'll get a better lat workout. Because when I do a front pull down, that Dickerson exercise, I take my elbow flexors out of the picture, and now I am really getting much better isolation on the lats muscle, which gets involved with extension. The average male doesn't like to do it though, because he likes to see as many plates as he can. In order to do that front pull down, you're going to pull that pin, move it up, and you're going to work with fewer plates. But you're working around the elbow flexors. Now I can isolate my lats with a front pull down exercise, that Dickerson. Now, if this pronated upper fibers, neutral grip, lower fibers, what about a semi-pronated? Can't you see that's my direct line of pull there? I'm pulling that belt, it wants to pull me through that range of motion. Wasn't that sort of halfway in between there and there? So I'm targeting more of my middle fibers. Now you're still working throughout the lats. But I can put more emphasis on the middle fibers if I have that range of motion, which typically you will get when you're in a semi-pronated position. I can put a little bit more emphasis in the upper fibers if I am doing this horizontal abduction. Neutral grip, true extension, extension. There is a reason for different grip positions when you get an equipment in a gym. And you need to know what is the rationale. Why do I do one exercise versus another? Because I'm targeting my muscles differently.
Seriously, Dr. Abbott, since you just demonstrated true extension of the shoulder joint, remember, only look at one joint at a time, could you just demonstrate true extension in contrast to horizontal extension?
We call this horizontal abduction, but we said some physical therapists may refer to that as horizontal extension.
Taken away from the body.
It used to be primarily called horizontal extension. Why? Opposite of horizontal flexion. Now we're seeing more and more of our physical therapists out there referring to this as horizontal abduction.
Because it's taken away from, remember, you're always using the center of the body for your reference point. Okay, so remember that. So abduction is taken away, or horizontal extension taken away from the center point of your body. Always remember that as your reference point.
We call this extension of the shoulder joint. Sometimes we may call it true extension just to differentiate it from horizontal extension. That's all. So if we say extension of the shoulder joint, true extension means the same thing.
You just have to memorize. You just have to know that. You guys, that's just given.
You may have a question like, I know NSCA's ask questions like this. You're working with a lat pull down machine. You've got a pronated grip. You're working eccentrically. What kind of movement do you have at the shoulder joint? Pronated grip. I'm working eccentrically. What kind of movement at the shoulder joint? Okay. Lat pull down. When I'm pulling down, is that concentric or eccentric?
Concentric or positive?
Concentric. When I ease up, it's eccentric. So what kind of movement of the shoulder joint when I'm working eccentrically? Abduction.
Guys, can you visualize it? You're taking away the center points of ab.
This is abduction of the shoulder joint.
Should we say horizontal abduction? No, just say.
No, because pronated grip. Pronated grip. Now, what if I used a supinated grip? And I said, what kind of movement are you getting when you're working eccentrically and you've got a supinated grip?
Extension, flexion.
Flexion of the shoulder joint. Flexion of the shoulder joint. Promise you. NSCA, ACSM will ask you questions like that. They expect you to understand these planes of movement that we went over. Joint motion terminology. Okay? I may even ask you a few questions like that.
Yes, he will. That's why I asked you guys to go over that, because this does take a long time really to conceptualize this, but that's why keep your eyes on Dr. Abbott when he's doing those movements. He's re-emphasizing this for a very good reason. And don't make me come be a monitor at your table like I have to for one. Okay.
Okay, he is doing a lat pull down. Getting adduction of the shoulder joint. What fibers are being emphasized here with this kind of
Wait,
lat pull down?
you're saying adduction, ADD, a dream day, sweetheart. Think of
Lower
me
fibers.
getting.
Lower fibers here. Notice he's pulling to the front. What you don't do is pull the bar behind your neck. How often you go in a gym and you watch people pulling it behind the neck? All the time, don't you? And a lot of people, they don't have that kind of lateral rotation capability. And so they're leaning over like this. What happens if that cable breaks? Your lat pull down machine is probably the most dangerous machine you have in a fitness facility today. It's a great exercise, don't get me wrong. Great exercise. I think I've had 4 cases now. People being injured, severely injured with lat pull down machines.
Real quickly, would you just tell us about that beautiful precious girl, what happened to her with the lat pull down? You guys, he's serious on this. Do
Well-
not put it behind your neck like that.
One of them I remember was Miss West Palm Beach. Lat pull down machine. You have bars that weigh different amounts. What if I have one plate, that top plate's a 10-pound plate, and I've got a 14-pound bar there? And this individual reached over, pulled that pin, only had a 10-pound plate to hold a 14-pound bar, came crashing down, broke her jaw. Another one. See that as what we call a gated snap hook? You'll see a picture of this again later on. You'll go into a lot of gyms and they use S-hooks. What an S-hook is? It's open. It makes it easy to change bars because with a lot of these lat pull-down places, they've got a lot of different bars you want to change them out. Very easy to change. Takes a little bit more time when I have to take that gated snap hook, open it up. What happens if he lets go of that bar?
Flying out.
It goes flying up here, weight stack comes down and bottoms out. That bar has that momentum and it comes right off that. I had one case, woman ended up with 34 stitches, just tore her whole head open. And it was a judgment against both the facility as well as the personal trainer who wasn't spotting correctly. You don't use an S-hook on something. In fact, if you look at the manual that comes with your lat pull down machine, they even have a picture of an S-hook with a big X so they don't use it. But you'll walk into gym after gym and you'll see personal trainers working with equipment and they've never read the instructional manuals for the equipment. Never read them. In your gym, you should have a separate area. You have a manual for all the different kinds of equipment that you have in that gym. As a former director of a large over 50,000 square foot facility, all our instructors had to sign off. They had read and would comply with the directions of the equipment. You'll go into most facilities today, you can't even find the instructional manuals that come with the equipment. Again, one where I walked into a gym and I could see this was very unstable, it was loose. And I even went to the manager of the facility and I said, "You've got an accident waiting to happen." "Oh, we'll take care of that." About a month later, I was contacted by a law firm. This individual herniated 4 cervical vertebrae because it parted. He brought that bar right down on his head, and I mean, just cracked his head open and herniated 4 cervical vertebrae.
You guys, the reason we're so passionate about this is because these could have been easily prevented, you know, and it just breaks your heart when you see these serious permanent injuries. And we get mostly the death cases, the gray death cases.
See it all
So
the
that's
time.
why we're so serious about this.
Got an injury case right now because of faulty equipment. And you are supposed to have a regular inspection schedule in a facility. You sign off, the equipment has been inspected. If there's a problem, that equipment has to be sidelined. Ideally, it should be taken off the floor. If not, you put a nice, attractive out of order sign on it. Sometimes you need to get that yellow tape that they use, like in,
Caution, police.
well, police, when they have a incident and they'll rope off an area with that yellow tape, put the yellow tape around there to keep people from going in and using it. Yeah.
What would you say is the difference between a pull-up and a lat pull-down?
Well, they're very similar. In fact, if I got a person that can't do an actual chin-up, have them do lat pull-downs.
about assisted pull-ups.
Well, the idea is you can go ahead and straighten yourself that way, so ideally eventually you can. Or what we do, we take an individual way. The average female today can't do a chin-up. Can't do a chin-up. Should be able to. Should be able to do a number of them.
But look at me, I know you're at the bar, I can't get to the bedroom until I do a chin-up, I've been doing that. Okay, go ahead.
Chin-up on the bedroom.
In the doorway. Too much information.
But-
Answer Bruno's question, sorry, Dad.
But what if you don't have a lat pull-down machine and someone can't do a chin-up? Get a chair. Get up into a position. Lift your legs so they're on the chair. Fight it as long as you can. Fight it, fight it, fight it. How are you working as you go down? You're working those muscles, you're doing a chin-up eccentrically. You keep doing that, and eventually you get strong enough where you can do it concentrically.
And they've got those machines out there, what's the name of all the gyms you go to that you can just put in whatever percentage of your body weight.
Put a
Yeah.
different amount on the weight stack to support a given amount of your body weight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gradually, you start using less and less weight in that weight stack, so you have to use more of your own.
So wouldn't it be a lot safer to do that than to walk on that?
What?
Wouldn't it be a lot safer to just do that than?
A lot safer to do the graviton machine rather than the lat
She
pull
got
down.
something going on,
Well-
back or run.
Yeah, like,
That's
this is
the
a
If you,
last
if
question.
you have it, use a lat pull down. It's a good machine to prepare you eventually where you can.
Yeah,
start
but now
doing
we're
it.
all frightened because a lot of them
Yeah.
are in good working conditions, so we'll just get on the graviton and see we work up to 100%.
But wait, aren't you also talking about like open or closed chain stress? I mean, isn't there a difference between when you pull the bar towards you or if you pull your body towards the bar? Doesn't
We're gonna
make
talk
sense.
about open and closed chain.
Excellent question.
Yeah, that's what I
That's why he's a professor.
But that's really not gonna be applying here.
Excellent.
No. It's a lot safer. Bring it down to the front. Actually, some recent studies, electromyographic studies they've been doing at the University of Miami, you get better work in your lats if you pull it to the front than if you do better work. And a lot of people end up developing a rotator cuff problem when they have to pull it behind the neck. So we don't want a behind neck lat pull. It's safer and it's more effective if you bring it down to the front.
Remember that, all you guys, and you big guys, once you ruin your rotator cuff, you're messed up for life. Be very careful, seriously.
Okay, let's take a break. We'll talk about pectoralis minor, another shoulder girdle muscle.
Terrible.
Okay, you guys know where the restrooms are here. Just go straight down past the car rooms to the left for the ladies, to the right for the men. And right as you open that door, they've got little tiny cups, but there's water, a water machine immediately to the right there.
If I held your baby, I have to take her home.
Is it raining outside? I'm telling you, I opened my little mouth just to trying to help you. Okay. You're welcome, Professor. Okay. When he takes his belt off, then I would stay away.
I can't fire it.
Yeah, I have job security. Who else is gonna work for you for free? He's wanted to cover too.
Morphine is free, Jane.
Okay, pectoralis minor.
All right.
We're looking at a muscle you see here that originates on costals 3, 4, and 5, inserts on that little bony finger that you see of the scapula. So here is that little bony finger we're talking about, and originates on these 3 ribs or costals. 3 different kind of movements we have with the pectoralis minor. Pectoralis minor works in protraction, just like the serratus anterior.
Pardon me, sorry, I didn't know I was going to interrupt this quickly. I just want everybody to remember, this is the 4th and the last shoulder girdle muscle. So go back to 5.5. See, all we're responsible for here are 4 shoulder girdle muscles. Shoulder girdle, not shoulder joint, so this is our last one, number 4. Pectoralis minor. We'll always remember forever and ever, it's a shoulder girdle muscle. Sir, thank you. Sir, yes, sir.
So, this muscle is in a position where when it pulls, inserting on that bony projection, it can pull the scapula around or protract it. Now additionally, because we're originating down here and inserting up here, you will see this muscle can also depress the scapula. If I am in an upwardly rotated position, and this muscle is really on stretch and it's in a position to downwardly rotate. So there are three different movements we have when dealing with the pectoralis minor. We have protraction, depression, and downward rotation. Pec minor, it's a chest muscle, but it is a small muscle compared to the pectoralis major, which we'll be looking at. Whereas the pectoralis major, you will see, is a shoulder joint muscle. Again, as Jane mentioned, the pectoralis minor is a shoulder girdle because it attaches to the scapula and moves the scapula. It lies underneath the pectoralis major. So it lies deep to the pectoralis major. You cannot palpate this muscle. So three movements again. Pulling insertion towards origin. You can pull the scapula around, protract. Because I can be pulling it down, again, insertion towards origin, I can depress it. And if I am upwardly rotated, then this little bony projection, you see that coracoid process, is way up there. So I can also get involved with downward rotation of the scapula. So it works with all three movements. If you are doing a dip, remember in a dip you got parallel bars. When you start, you are in an elevated position. Elevated. So when you push up away from those bars, you are getting depression of the scapula. Pec minor is a depressor. It works hand in hand with fibers of the trapezius. Lower fibers of the trapezius also got involved with depression. When I'm doing a push-up, push myself away from the ground in order to get my arms in front of me, I have to get protraction of the scapula. Protraction. Remember we said the serratus anterior is a protractor. The serratus anterior tends to, in addition to protraction, give us some upward rotation of the scapula. Pec minor, in addition to being a protractor, gives us some downward rotation of the scapula. So if I'm doing a flat bench press, I'm working both my serratus anterior and my pec minor. They both work together in protraction. But whereas the serratus is an upward rotator as well, and the pec minor is a downward rotator, they neutralize. There's that term again. Remember, muscles work as neutralizers and counteract, offset. Neutralize each other as far as upward and downward rotation, and they work together in protraction. So when I'm doing a push-up, when I'm doing a bench press, I'm working serratus and pec minor, shoulder girdle muscles, to work in protraction of that scapula. If I am doing a chin-up, or I could be doing a lat pull-down, I have to reach up and grab a bar. One case, chin-up, I'm pulling myself up to the bar. Lat pull-down, I'm pulling the bar down to me. But in both cases, in order to reach up and grab a bar, what position does the scapula have to be in? Upwardly rotated. And my pec minor works with downward rotation along with the rhomboids and mid-traps. So pec minor gets involved with downward rotation. Downward rotation. Press downs. If you're familiar with this, take a lat pull down, a bar, pull it down here. Now I've got a bar down here, here's my cable, it goes up over a pulley, over to another pulley down to the weight stack. That back pressure forces me into elevation, doesn't it? But press down is nothing more than I'm keeping my arm straight and I am just pressing down. I am depressing the scapula. Remember, lower fibers of the traps get involved with depression along with the pec minor. They work together. Pec minor, lower fibers, trapezius, pressing down. Depression. Depression of the scapula. Work together.
Dr. M, should we use this motion to help stabilize the shoulder?
I'm sorry?
Should we use this motion to help the stabilization?
Should you use
of
this
the-
motion to help stabilize the shoulder
the
joint?
shoulder? Yeah.
You're talking about this?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pressure, yeah, because some physical therapists, friends of mine, and we work with some fighters, we do the variation on the bench like this.
You will see that, and again, you were doing
Yeah,
depression.
depression.
And
Like
sometimes
the
in
bench.
physical therapy centers, you'll see quite often in physical therapy centers, they've got a couple of parallel bars to stabilize people when they're walking. Quite enough, they'll bring you over to those bars, and they will have you do this, because it does help the stabilization of the shoulder joint. When you think of people who've had rotator cuff surgery, I'm going through rehab right now, rotator cuff surgery. See, I do all these, I've had all these surgeries just so I can better tell you.
That's exactly what happens in surgery.
So neck, back, shoulder. But the idea here is that the shoulder joint is a very complex joint. When you think of, you've got a shallow socket, think of the wide range of movement you have with the shoulder joint. So many different muscles are involved with stabilization of that shoulder joint. So when you go through rehab, they will do exercises to depression. You'll do just the opposite. Typically also do like shoulder shrugs. And you will do activities where you're going to be involved with really stable. Familiar with these body blades out there? The blade, they vibrate. Oh, you can vibrate. I'll tell you, hold them in there and you're vibrating, or you do this, go through the range of motion while it's vibrating. All these things that help you stabilize that shoulder joint. So we have 4 muscles that we get to in the strength conditioning course, not here, which are called rotator cuff muscles. 2 of the muscles are involved with medial rotation, or rather 1 with medial rotation, 2 with lateral rotation, and 1 with initiating abduction. But all 4 of these muscles help stabilize that head of the humerus in that very shallow side. And so you will do exercises where you are working all these major muscles. So not only am I working rotator cuff muscles, but I'm going to be working pec minor, lats, and deltoid, and they'll have you doing all sorts of different exercises because multiple muscles are involved to stabilize the shoulder joint. Not only our rotator cuff muscles, that's the primary function is stabilization, but these other muscles that we're talking about get involved with shoulder joint movement very well. The press down is something you see very few people are even familiar with. The press down. You've got that bar, and you just stress down, press down. Lower fibers of the trapezius, pec minor, depression, depression, press down. This shows you, there's your pec minor. Okay. This is the pec major. There's the cut, just laid it open so you can see underneath it. There is your pec minor. Here is your serratus, serratus anterior. Later on, we're going to be looking at obliques, external oblique muscle, bicep, deltoid.
And you can see this was a very fit individual, and they did a very
Most of the
beautiful
time,
clinical.
when you take what they call a gross anatomy lab at a university, it lives up to its name, it's gross.
Yeah.
Because they're older people, a lot of muscle atrophy, and they've been so mutilated by all the students, the smell of formaldehyde. No formaldehyde in this. This was cadaver specially made just for kinesiology. You keep it in a room with a certain, really, 2 or 3 years, just maintaining temperature and humidity. You can keep a cadaver like that and cut it in such a way that you can lay muscles up like this, lay it back so you can see the pectoralis minor underneath.
No organ right there. This muscle.
Well, here, this was designed just to really work with students in the area of kinesiology. And you'll see, if you go on the strength conditioning course, we'll show you cadavers. Great videos we have. In fact, a lot of our students, after they view it, go out and buy those videos themselves because they're very professionally done, and it's not going to upset you. A lot of people think, oh, I don't want to look at it. Well, it's very professionally done, not like that.
Not like when you have to go in on an autopsy. That you don't want to do.
Yeah, very proud of Jane, she didn't say.
Doesn't bother me.
I was wanting to. I was in shock,
It does not bother me.
Is that white shaded, is that like fat
Oh,
interstitial?
back
Oh,
on back
you
in
can
Brazil.
see some
Back in
fat
Brazil.
in between muscle fibers. Remember, we talked about intramuscular fat, fat that's in the muscle cells, but we also have intermuscular fat, which is fat laid down between muscle fibers. You go to Winn-Dixie and Publix, they call it marbling. That's the fat. In between muscle fibers. So, pectoralis minor. Again, costals 3, 4, and 5. Inserts on that little bony projection, that little bony finger that we have. Bench press. Notice again, how's he spotting?
Yeah, alternating.
Alternating grip. Alternating grip. Feet are apart, keeping the back straight, bending his knees, going with the individual. One of the biggest problems we have with most bench presses, and I've been telling students for years to go out and make some money and do this. Design a bench where instead of having a bar right across the front where you can't really get a good staggered stance, you're going to have a V. So you can get a good staggered stance and you'll be much more secure as a spotter. But we talk about a flat bench. This is a flat bench. Notice the grip is a closed grip. You never use an open grip. Don't hold the bar like that. In order to hold a bar with an open grip, you have to get into a hyperextension of the wrist. Sometimes people develop little nodules on the tendons here, forcing themselves into that. So you always use a closed grip. Basically, you're trying to keep those wrists straight, as you see there. Okay, so on a flat bench, you're using serratus anterior, pec minor. They work together with protraction. So as he is lifting that bar, he is going to be working those muscles concentrically. As he lowers the bar, same muscles are working eccentrically. Yes, as he is lowering that bar, he is getting retraction of the scapula, but he is still working his protractors of the scapula. They're just working eccentrically, controlling that descent.
Could you repeat this? When you're working with a bar like that, so you've got resistance, you're working the same muscles. But let's say when you're coming back, the same muscles, but just eccentrically. You're the same muscles either positively
Sure, with all
or
exercises.
eccentrically. Remember that.
When I do any exercise, when I am overcoming gravity, that means that bar is coming up, weight stack is coming up, maybe I'm lifting my own body weight like a push-up. Anytime I'm overcoming gravity, all the muscles that are working dynamically are working concentrically. As I lower myself or lower a weight, when I'm giving into the pull of gravity, same muscles are working. They're all working, but now they're working eccentrically. Eccentrically. Yes, there'll be other muscles that are working to stabilize, that are working statically. Stabilization. Okay? Pectoralis major. Pec minor lies underneath, deep to the pectoralis major.
Excuse me, Dr. Abbott. Now, this is a shoulder. We're done with these shoulder girdle muscles. This is a shoulder joint muscle. Don't ever
Because you
confuse that.
see where
Pec
it
major,
inserts.
shoulder joint.
It inserts on the humerus, therefore you're creating movement of the shoulder joint. This is a large radiating muscle. Radiates over a wide area. We have fibers that go up here and attach, originate on the clavicle, proximal. Remember, distal end of the clavicle, proximal. Proximal end of the clavicle. We have fibers on the sternum. We refer to these as sternal fibers. These are clavicular fibers, sternal fibers, and we even have some fibers attaching to a couple of ribs, costal fibers. You will see that pectoralis major works in exercises which are really sort of opposite exercises. Just working different fibers, different fibers. Again, this is where you can use a belt, and when you do this, get a better idea of which fibers are working to bring about what kind of motion. So here is my insertion. If I am standing here Mental, anatomical position, palms facing to the front, fundamental, palms are facing inward. If I'm standing here in a fundamental position and I look at my clavicular fibers, can't you see when the clavicular fibers contract, they're going to pull my arm up in flexion. Flexion of the shoulder joint. But if my arm were out here in a flexed position, can't you see lower fibers can get involved with extension? Extension. Now, if I'm doing something like a flat bench press, I'm coming around in horizontal adduction or horizontal flexion. Can't you see these sort of sternal, mid-sternal fibers? They're in an ideal position to pull that arm around that range of motion. Well, what if I were doing a decline bench press? Remember, relatively a decline, out and down. Can't you see these lower fibers in a position to bring that arm to the front and down at the same time? What if I'm doing an incline bench? Can't you see these upper sternal to even clavicular fibers are involved with an incline? So I've got different fibers bring about completely different types of movements here. Pectoralis major, follow a lot of different exercises here. So do this with a belt. Put it on your arm. Say, okay, if my arm is out here and these are mid-sternal fibers, when I pull, you see it pulls your arm across that way. But if I take these lower fibers down here, it pulls my arm down and across. If I look at these fibers up here and I'm down here in that fundamental position, it pulls my arm up. If I'm doing an incline, remember we said incline, serratus anterior. But in the shoulder joint, upper sternal, 2 clavicular fibers, incline, incline. So you'll see people, they do a flat bench, a decline bench, an incline bench. And they do different benches because they're targeting different fibers of the pectoralis major muscle. What if I do an overhead press? Do I use my pectoralis major? No.
No.
No. Ever notice, in fact, I think I told you before, remember I said there used to be 3 Olympic lifts? Did I tell you this?
No.
There used to be 3 Olympic lifts. Today we have 2. We have the snatch and the clean and jerk. They used to have one called a military press. And you would stand there with your feet together, position military tension, press a weight over your head. And then I said, not very stable. Let's take your feet apart. Overhead press. In fact, don't you see some machines today? They call them military press machines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actually, we've really done away with military press, an Olympic move. Because an Olympic move, you're supposed to stand upright, press a weight directly over your head. But if you watch what people would do, get right in it. Do that. They would lean back. Now, if I lean back, then what have I done? I've made it an incline press, and I bring in 5 upper fibers of pectoralis major. I'm cheating. The other thing is people would snap back into hyperextension low back, which was dangerous. So they did away with the military press because of the danger involved and the cheating aspect of it. Now, where are my more massive fibers in the pectoralis major? Lower, mid, upper?
Mid.
Upper.
Lower. Lower. Are you stronger in a flat bench or a decline bench? Decline bench, right? You got more mass down here. Are you stronger in a flat bench or an incline? Flat bench.
Flat bench.
Are you stronger in an incline bench or an overhead press? Incline bench. Once you go to the overhead press, your pectoralis major drops out of the picture. Now, you use different fibers of the pectoralis major. Brent, can I get you up here again? Can I get you to take your actual shirt completely off?
You know, after this, hey, he just had to have some biopsies, doctor. I mean,
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable. You should always ask me to.
Biopsy
screen
was in
people
the neck.
first.
It was, yeah, here and
Okay.
Yeah, so don't touch it. Bruno may have to come up and help.
Okay. If his arm is up here and he starts to raise his arm against resistance, anterior deltoid, what's jumping out there? Clavicular fibers. In fact, what's happening down there? Inhibited, right? But what if he's pressing down? Now what's jumping out? Lower fibers. Inhibited in your clavicular fibers. So that it depends. If he's bringing his arm straight across, you can see these fibers jumping out. Okay? But again, like an incline, if he's doing an incline press, see these fibers, clavicular fibers, what's happening down there? No. But what if we do a decline, he's pressing down and out? Now you see those lower fibers kicking in there. So, you see different fibers of the pectoralis working depending upon what exercise you're doing. Thank you. Good.
Just so you guys know, if he disappears, they dissect him to use him.
I don't think Bruno would like that too much. No.
No, you don't get much leaner than Brent is.
Jeremy, did you have a question?
He's in a fitness testing course now where we do body fat testing on everybody in the class. He's probably going to come out as the meanest person.
That we've ever done in all these decades. Okay, and Jeremy, you had a question, sir?
What about like bench, doing chest and bench, as opposed to those, the one that you sit in, you hold like an hands?
Right.
Like sit up press.
Like you sit in it and it has like the, what was that, 7 maybe?
Say about hammer strength.
Well, they have seated bench press.
Oh, he's talking about a hammer?
You could do incline, decline, you could do.
Yeah. Sometimes you have like a seated press machine. Like sometimes by changing the seat height, I might have one seat height and I'm doing a flat. I may raise that seat up and I'm doing a decline. I may take the seat all the way down and I'm doing an incline. So I can change where I'm targeting the pectoralis major by my seat size. Ever notice if a person's doing a flat bench, when they get to that last rep, they can't get that last rep. What do they like to do?
Raise their foot.
Yeah. Because if I do that, I've turned it into a decline, I get more of those lower, more massive fibers. If you watch a powerlifting contest, you have 5 points of contact when you're doing a bench. Both feet have got to be on the ground. Your butt's got to be on the ground, your shoulders have to be on the ground, and your head's got to be on the bench. Okay? Your butt, shoulders, head touching the bench, feet on the ground. But you will see guys will still keep their butt on that bench, shoulder, and yet they will do this. Get a little bit more of those more massive lower fibers. For a lot of people, you'll see when they're doing a bench press, they like to pick the feet up, put it on the bench, don't they? Never do that. Okay. But they'll put the feet on the bench, and then when they get that last one, they can really lift up and turn it into a decline bench. If you could imagine you're doing a lot of people when they're doing a bench press, they don't have a spotter. And they think, oh, I've got enough left to rack that bar. Sometimes they can't. Thought they had enough energy left and they didn't. That's when you see them trying to roll the bar down, dump the plates. But if you have your feet on the bench, what happens if you start to lose it? The bar comes down on you. That's why we say you never bring your feet up on the bench. A lot of people like to bring their feet up because then they can really lift themselves, turn it into a decline, and they get the last couple repetitions if they're having trouble. But if you lose it, you don't have a spotter and you lose it, and that bar's coming down on you. You're in big trouble. Big trouble. So be familiar with the difference then with your bench presses. Okay? If I'm doing dips, remember, elevated with the scapula. I'm in what position with the shoulder joint when I start a dip?
Hyperextended.
Hyperextended. What fibers do you think lie in a position they're gonna bring that arm forward in flexion there.
Lower fiber.
Yeah. Again, you've got to look at the actual angle here. I'm back here. Can't you see these lower fibers in a position to bring that arm forward when I'm doing it? When we do flies, I may do flat bench fly. I may be doing an incline bench fly, incline. You could even be head down and be doing decline. Again, I mentioned this the other night. Is a fly a good exercise to work your muscles through the whole range of motion, your pectoralis major? Because when people do a fly, isn't that what they're primarily targeting? Pec major. It's a terrible exercise to work your pec major through the full range of motion. Why? Remember we discussed this the other night. When I'm doing a fly, I've got those dumbbells. Initially, I am lifting against gravity, right? What happens at the end of the range of motion?
Nothing, man. No
Gravity
resistance.
working against you. Gravity may even help you bring them together. So you don't get to work your pec major effectively through the whole range of motion unless you do what? I'm doing a fly, and I want to get better work on my pectoralis major.
Squeeze.
Squeeze! When they say squeeze, you are doing something we call muscular co-contraction.
And we're gonna do that later, don't
Come
confuse
back,
us now.
the point is this. I don't have gravity working against me at the end of the range of motion. Where do I get my resistance? My lats, posterior deltoid. When I'm doing a fly, my anterior deltoid, pec major are working, but they only really work at the beginning of the range of motion. If I want to continue working throughout the full range of motion, then I contract opposing antagonistic muscles. I contract my posterior deltoid against my anterior. I contract my lats against my pec major. That's why people squeeze as they go through that range of motion. Because if you don't squeeze, you're only working at the beginning of the range of motion. That's why we say a fly is really not a good exercise for the pec major through the full range of motion.
It's not like you have a lot of options.
What?
It's not like you have a lot of options.
It's not like you have a lot of options.
Well, your bench press is great. In fact, what a lot of people do, rather than a bench, if I'm working with a regular bar, my hands are a certain distance apart, aren't they? They will remain that same distance apart if I'm working with a bench. But what if I'm working with a dumbbell? You get a greater range of motion, don't you? So I can get a greater range of motion doing a dumbbell press. I find a lot of bodybuilders prefer to do with the dumbbells. Plus, maybe I get in one of those pec decks. I've got those pads up here against my forearm, and I've got resistance through the whole range of motion. Whole range of motion. So there's certainly a lot of exercises out there where you can work. What if I get in a cross cable system? I got a cable coming down from there and a cable from there. I don't stop there.
Crossover.
Left over right, right over left. Much greater range of motion. Much greater range of motion. In fact, with these pec decks, a lot of them will have handles. I may work one arm at a time. Instead of stopping there, I bring it on through. Hold a handle here, bring that one on through. So there are a lot of different pieces of equipment out there where you can work your pectoralis major very effectively through the whole range of motion. Okay, so push-ups, obviously. I'm working pectoralis major. My hand position makes a difference, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of where your hand is. What you have to do is look at the range of motion. If my arm's coming straight across like that, horizontal abduction, mid-fibers. I'm down here.
No.
Down here initially, low fibers, but as I continue through the range of motion, then we're going to start to move to the upper fibers. So we literally change the fibers within the pectoralis major as we go through that range of motion. So my hand position makes a big difference. What you have to do is just look at what is the range of motion that you're going through. Again, we talked about bench. We've got flat bench, incline, decline. Chin-ups. What do you think I'm working when I do a chin-up? Supinating grip with a chin-up. Can't you see lower fibers are going to have some involvement there? Same thing if I do I do a pronated, chin up, pulling out. Can't you see some of these lower fibers here have action and adduction? Adduction. Cable cross we just talked about. You'll see a lot of these, you can adjust the cables. I might start up here where I'm coming down and across. I might be here where I'm coming across. I might even start lower and be coming up and across. Up and across. Lat pull down. What's working in a lat pull down? Again, this way,
Lower.
lower fibers. Same thing here, lower fibers. Okay. Front pull down. Lower fibers initially, have some involvement. Front raid, what's working with front raid? Pectoralis major, what fibers?
Upper.
Clavicular fibers. It's upper fibers are in a position. Flex that shoulder joint. Okay. You could see that with Brett. When we had to put the arm out there, press down one time, up the other, you could see. Tried to press up, you saw those upper fibers, clavicular fibers jump out. Tried to press down, you could see those lower fibers.
So when you say clavicular fibers, you're referring to the upper fibers. What is upper clavicular fibers because of where they attach?
These are your clavicular fibers, sternal fibers. Sometimes we talk about upper sternal, mid-sternal, lower sternal, and then into costal fibers. It's a large radiating muscle. A lot of exercises. You can even find other exercises beyond this where they're working. You see the different areas of origin, see where it inserts. Actually, the pectoralis major also has some involvement with some medial rotation. Medial rotation of the shoulder. Push up. Think of this as a chest exercise, and it is. But you're also going to be working shoulder girdle area. What's working here? Shoulder girdle.
Rhomboid.
Serratus anterior. Serratus and?
Rhomboid.
And?
A new one. Pec minor, we all said at once.
Serratus and pec minor. They get involved with protraction.
Could we almost always think whenever we say serratus anterior that the pec minor is working in protraction?
No.
What? Wait,
They work together in protraction. But what
Protraction.
if I'm doing an incline press? I need protraction, but I need upward rotation. Which is really going to be working there, the serratus or pec minor?
serratus, because we know the pec minor
But
is
if I'm
down.
doing a decline press, or I have some depression along with protraction, then my pec minor.
Yeah, but wouldn't the serratus is not working at all?
Flat bench, we think of pec minor, serratus working together. And a push up, think serratus, pec minor. Shoulder joint, what deltoid is working here?
Interior.
Anterior. Is my posterior working at all?
No.
No, it's inhibited.
Right.
Inhibited. But then also you have your pectoralis major. Pectoralis major. Can you see where typically there would be a tendency to get into some extension of the hip joint? We don't want to sag. Unless I contract muscles across the hip joint anteriorly, hip flexors. So I have muscles called hip flexors, which are stabilizing my hip joint. Would my knees want to collapse into knee flexion? But I'm working my quads to stabilize the knee joint.
For like my advanced athletes, I like to do the push-up because the push-up is very easy for them. So we do like, once they're like fatigued already at the end of the workout, one leg push-up. We'll keep one leg in the air and then let's say they do like 20, then switch leg and then do another 20.
You're going to see some slides later on where we do that. In fact, you can do a lot of things to increase the challenging aspect of doing a push-up. And you can just lift one leg up. Sometimes we even get a stability ball. Put our feet on a stability ball, which makes it more challenging.
Remember, Stefan is training elite athletes, NNA, so we'll be training most of our clients a little differently.
But you will find if you go on to the functional training course, you are going to learn a lot of these adaptations where I can change, make minor changes as far as my stability is concerned to create a greater challenge. or the trunk region. So a lot of things you can do to modify a push-up. In many respects, it's a better exercise than a bench press, because when I'm in a bench press, yeah, I'm working the shoulder girdle area, shoulder joint, and I'm working the elbow joint, but otherwise, I'm on a stable position on that bench. Here, I've got to bring a lot more muscles into play. It's a functional type of exercise. You'll see a lot of people who may be able to press a lot of weight, but it doesn't do them any good. The old adage, trying to fire a cannon from a canoe. Doesn't work, it goes over. We know that if you're out there and you're doing something like this as a football player, and you're doing like a bench, you get up to 40% of your body weight and you're going backwards. So we see people developing a lot of strength that they may be able to use in a bench, but they can't use it when they get out there in the field. It's not functional strength. It's for what we call show strength. Yeah, if I'm going to be in a powerlifting contest, how much can I bench press? But does that do me any good when I get out on the football field? No. You may end up, this is the old adage of how much strength is enough. A lot of people have a mistaken idea. The more you can get, the better off you are. Or you may get to the point where, too much strength can become a liability. If you watch really good athletes, they look nothing like a bodybuilder. They just don't look like bodybuilders. Look at a gymnast. Look at a person who's a decathlete. These are martial artists. And yeah, there's some big ones out there, but they're not big and bulky like a bodybuilder. They're concerned more with functional strength. Can I use what I'm doing? Okay. Here you see a chest press machine. Notice there are different grips here. Using a pronated grip, but what about these handles? You use those handles, then you're using what kind of grip?
Neutral.
Neutral grip. Doesn't that change my range of motion?
Yeah.
Would that change my action on the pectoralis major?
Yes.
In one case, you think of mid-sternal fibers. What if I'm here like this?
Upper.
Yeah. Or upper sternal to clavicular fibers are going to be involved. So, by changing my grip position, I change my range of motion, therefore I'm changing which fibers I'm targeting in my pectoralis major. Again, these are subtle things, but if you're going to get into this area of personal training, you're expected to know why would I do one exercise versus another exercise. Spotting. You watch people doing flies. Typically in flies, the elbows would not be bent that much, would they? When you go into a gym, where does everybody spot? You don't. You don't spot the elbows when a person's doing a fly.
Spot the wrists.
What happens if a person's, you're down there at the elbows and they lose control of their dumbbells? They're in the face. You're going to eat them. This is a cover of the ACE Personal Training Manual. Perfect picture of what not to do. Spotting a person. I'm spotting a person. You don't spot there. You spot the wrist. You spot the wrist. You spot the wrist. So if something happens, you can go right in there, pick up those dumbbells, or take them off to the side. If you can't control them, you can drop them off to the side. But you don't want them ending up in the individual's face. Next time you go to a gym, watch people doing a fly, or maybe someone's doing a seated overhead press with dumbbells, invariably you will see trainers spotting the elbows. I promise you, if you sit for the NSC exam, you will probably see. And I know one of the versions, or a couple of versions of their test, the videos, you will see people spotting the elbows, and that's a mistake that you have to pick up. Have to pick it up.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't tell you the number of times I pick up a picture of an advertisement or something, and they have people spotting it incorrectly. Incorrectly.
I'm sorry, Doctor, did you tell them why about when they dropped the weight on the guy's face?
Yeah, there's one case where a personal trainer doesn't know how to take the weights from someone. He reaches over and takes a dumbbell and drops it in his client's face.
Oh.
These are things we discuss in the strength and conditioning course. How do you get a person into an appropriate position on a bench to do a fly? How do you give them the dumbbells? How do you get into position? How do you get them out of that position? Okay, biceps brachii. Brachii just means arm, two-headed muscle. We have a long head, you see it here. It attaches just above that socket that we have in the shoulder joint. Supraglenoid tubercle. Actually, the little socket that we have is called the glenoid fossa. You don't have to know it in this course, but you go on the strength and conditioning course, you will. The shoulder joint is also called the glenohumeral joint. And that socket is called the glenoid fossa. It's this socket that you have right there, glenoid fossa. Humerus, glenohumeral joint. More often, when you're talking to physical therapists, they will probably use that term. They will probably say glenohumeral joint rather than shoulder joint. Glenohumeral joint. So, you have a long head which attaches a little bony projection up here, supraglenoid tubercle. The short head attaches here to that little bony finger, coracoid process. Notice this one crosses the shoulder joint anteriorly, the short head. That's why the bicep gets involved in this movement we call shoulder flexion. If you're doing a front raise, we think of working anterior deltoid, but you're also working the short head, the bicep brachii muscle. Anytime we do elbow flexion against resistance, we're working these muscles we call elbow flexors, and we have a number of them. We talk about doing regular bicep curls, hammer curls, and even reverse curls. And there's a reason why we do one versus the other. So anytime I am doing elbow flexion against resistance, my elbow flexors are coming into play. If I'm doing a rowing exercise, whether it be a bent over row, a seated row, a T-bar row, anytime I'm rowing against resistance, I am getting elbow flexion, I am working my elbow flexors. Lat pull down. Elbow flexors, chin up, rope climbing, great exercise, great exercise. Very functional type of exercise when you start doing rope climbing. Now, the bicep brachii, yes, it's an elbow flexor, that's what most people are aware of. But most people are unaware of the fact that it also gets involved with flexion of the shoulder. The other thing about the bicep brachii, because it attaches to the radius, there's a little bony projection here. Tuberosities are little bony projections, serve as anchoring points. This is called the radial tuberosity. Remember, the radius rotates. And so, your bicep muscle attaches to this little radial tuberosity here. If I'm in a position like this, or neutral, or even pronated, my bicep will supinate. In fact, when you look at a book, kinesiology, they talk about the bicep, its primary function is to supination. Supination. So when we talk about the bicep, it not only flexes the elbow, it not only flexes the shoulder joint, but it is involved with supination. Supination. So these are all activities where you are doing elbow flexion against resistance. Here we see a traditional bicep curl. Individual working with a flat bar, keeping the elbows in. You're going to be working not only the bicep, but you're going to be working other elbow flexors we'll talk about. Brachioradialis, brachialis. You're even going to work a muscle that gets involved with pronation, called the pronator teres. So the number of muscles that are assisting the bicep when doing this exercise. Remember, we said before, you're in a supinated position the whole time, where if I look at the individual in that, what do we call this position? Anatomical position. Palms are facing in front. Remember, that's fundamental?
Right.
Palms facing medially, anatomical. My arm comes down sort of parallel with the trunk. then what happens with my forearm? It flares out. So if I just flex my elbows, what position is my hand in?
Supinated.
That's neutral, that's supinated, halfway in between is
Semi-supinated.
semi-supinated. That's the natural position I'm in when I do this. That's why we have an easy curl bar. Easy curl bar has that angling in the bar. It makes it easier. Your natural range there. Also, you will see in that position, I have almost max efficiency with my bicep, and I almost have max efficiency with our brachioradialis, which makes it a little bit easier. That's a traditional bicep curl. Brachii, arm, radialis, it attaches to the radius. Here you see it originates. It crosses the elbow joint anteriorly. Therefore, it's an elbow flexor. But it also attaches, like the bicep, to the radius, which rotates. Now, if I am in a neutral position, my brachioradialis muscle comes down here and attaches on the radius. And we have sort of direct line of pull. If I'm in a supinated position, my brachioradialis not only wants to flex the elbow, it wants to pronate me to the neutral position. Because that's where we have direct line of pull, because of the way it inserts it. If I'm in a pronated position, my brachioradialis not only wants to elbow flex, but it wants to supinate me to the neutral position. So when you look at your book, it says the brachioradialis is not only an elbow flexor, but it is a semi-pronator and a semi-supinator. It doesn't pronate all the way, it doesn't supinate all the way, part way. Therefore, it's a semi-pronator, semi-supinator. When we do a hammer curl, we're in the neutral position. We've got direct line of pull. When you do a hammer curl. Okay. Again, you see those same exercises you saw before. Here you see a hammer curl. She's doing an alternating hammer curl. She maintains that neutral position. I may want to do an alternating one, because if I don't, and both of those are out here, going to be a little bit more stress in the back. Move my whole center of gravity out there. So a little bit less stress in the back. I do an alternating hammer curl. Maintain that neutral position. Now, you'll also see an exercise which is very common when people are working with dumbbells. I start in a neutral position, but then I supinate. So as I'm coming up, neutral, and I supinate. Now I am doing what the bicep brachii does best. Because remember, it is both a flexor and a supinator. So you'll see people curl this way. They come up, coming up, supinating, as they go back down to the neutral position. Come up, come up. So I'm doing elbow flexion with supination. I'm doing what the bicep brachii does best, because it is both an elbow flexor and a supinator. Okay. Hammer curl, though, you just maintain that neutral position. We're sort of targeting the brachioradialis there. We're still working all the elbow flexors, but that's the position the brachioradialis is best suited for. Direct line of pull. Now, under the brachioradialis is a muscle called the brachialis. You see where it originates, crosses the elbow joint anteriorly, and then it inserts on the ulna. Now, unlike the bicep brachii and the brachioradialis, which attached and inserted on the radius, this inserts on the ulna. The ulna does not rotate. When you look at textbooks on kinesiology, they will refer to the brachialis as the only true elbow flexor.
And you guys, I would highlight, you highlight everything, but this, you see he has it in parentheses there under brachialis on 5.9, only true elbow flexor. Tell us why.
It does not make any difference what position your hand is in. I can be in a supinated, I can be neutral, I can be pronated. I can be doing a reverse curl. My brachialis functions with the same degree of efficiency So sometimes people will do a reverse curl with the idea that I may be getting better isolation of the brachialis. There's another reason, though, we really do a reverse curl. If I'm doing a regular curl, supinated position, that weight wants to force me into wrist extension, doesn't it? So in order to maintain that straight wrist, I have to use my wrist flexors. But what if I do a reverse curl? Now that weight wants to force me into wrist flexion, so I have to use my wrist extensors to stabilize the wrist. These muscles in the backside of your forearm. So that's another reason why people will do a reverse curl. Now you will not be as strong. You're not going to handle as much weight in a reverse curl as you do here. Because you get bicep brachii, more efficient in that position. Brachioradialis, most efficient neutral position. My bicep, my brachioradialis, they would like to rotate me, but we're not rotating. We're maintaining that position. So we do it for the brachialis, but we also do it to work these muscles, the backside of the forearm. Backside of the forearm. Muscles involved with wrist extension.
Now, Tom, can we use the semi-pronated bar to use because it's more anatomical? Because sometimes I try to use the, say, a flat bar,
Yeah.
and a pronated grip, and then it's hard. So
It's hard.
if you use the semi-pronated bar,
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, you get down there and you're doing wrist extensions with it, it's hard getting into that position. Now, you may use an easy curl bar.
it's a cool bar, yeah, you just,
It's more comfortable because of the angle of that bar, you can be in a kind of semi-pronated position and do it. Rope climbing. Great exercise. Great exercise. And again, it's a very functional type of activity. This is something you'll see a lot of athletes doing. One of the concerns we have is if you go over to the Institute of Human Performance where we teach, you'll see ropes going up in the ceiling. Great. Unless you lose control at the top of the rope. We use the term pull-up, chin-up. Some people think of a pull-up, pronated position, chin-up, supinated position. A lot of people really don't even differentiate. They use those terms sort of interchangeably. For years and years, I used to tell people in this class, I wish someone would develop a device and go out and make a bunch of money. You ever seen these tread walls? It's a wall, it's a climbing wall, but it rotates. So you're only always just about a foot off the ground. You fall, not a problem. So, well, why don't you develop something with a rope that does the same thing? You can continue to climb, but you're only maybe a few inches off the ground. Can't make it, fine. 2 years ago, someone finally came out with it.
He comes up with these incredible ideas, but he's so busy, we think if you're teaching us, he doesn't do it. I should have forced you, we could have gone to the Shark Tank, and where would we be today? Excuse me.
But this device they have, this Viper rope climber, you know, you're basically pull yourself a couple inches off that seat, and you're just climbing a rope. You have to handle your whole body weight. In fact, you can even move down and start pulling it, almost like a tug of war. Do a lot of things with it. A very functional type of activity again. Really, you work those elbow flexors. You'll see a lot of people have enough strength, not on the elbow flexors, but many other muscles, where they won't even be gripping the rope with their legs at all, and they'll just go up that rope, just using their, their arms. But obviously, many muscles involved in the shoulder joint, shoulder girdle area. You're doing it. If you think about it, I'm reaching up here, and I'm pulling down like this. What's working in the shoulder girdle area?
Delt. Posterior
What's
delt.
the easiest rhomboid?
What position on my scapula going to be in when I reach up and grab it? Upward rotated.
Rotated.
So when I'm pulling down like that, what's happening with the scapula?
Deeper.
Downward rotation.
Downward rotation.
Rhomboids at
Mid-trap?
mid-traps.
Traps.
Okay. Shoulder joint area. Pulling up, don't I have to get some extension there?
Yeah.
Which deltoid is working?
Posterior.
Posterior deltoid. What else is working in the shoulder joint area?
The,
Lower fibers,
Lower
the
fiber.
pectoralis major are working, and then my elbow flexors. My elbow flexors. So you bring a lot of muscles into play when you do something like rope climb. Okay. Triceps. Three-headed muscle. Biceps, two-headed muscle. Three-headed muscle. That's why you see 3 O's here. Origin. We have a lateral head of the triceps, the medial head. Then we have what's called a long head. Now notice the lateral and the medial head, they originate on the actual humerus. But where does the long head originate?
Scapula.
On the scapula.
Lower side.
Scapula. All 3 heads come together in a common tendon that inserts down here on a bony projection of the ulna. So this is that bony projection. All 3 heads come together in that common tendon, which attaches, inserts there, so when we pull, we extend the elbow joint. Elbow extension. What about, though, that long head? If the long head, see where it attaches here? It also then is crossing the shoulder joint. Shoulder joint. So can't you see that that long head, it can have involvement with extensions of the shoulder joint. So when you look at the long head, it is biparticular. It's going to have action on both the shoulder joint as well as the elbow joint. The shoulder joint as well as the elbow joint. Anytime I'm extending the elbow joint against resistance, I'm using my triceps. But if I'm extending the shoulder joint against resistance, then I'm using the long head. Long head. Dips. In fact, why do most people do dips? Primarily for? Isn't that what gives out first? Really? But also there's another muscle we really are working. We're also really targeting when we do dips. Exactly. Anterior deltoid. It's helping in this flexion action. So when I do dips, really working that anterior head. Yeah, I'm extending the elbow joint. Really working my tricep. Anterior head. Pectoralis major. What fibers are working when I'm doing a dip? I mentioned it before. Lower fibers. They're also bringing that arm forward. In flexion. Anterior deltoid, pectoralis major. Now, when I... Yes, we're getting into that. When you think of the shoulder girdle area, we've talked about shoulder joint here and elbow joint, but what about the shoulder girdle area? What position is the scapula in when I start a dip?
Elevated.
Elevated
and retract.
And hyper-retract.
Hyper-retract.
Hyper-retract. So when I'm going up, I'm getting some depression, but I'm also getting some protraction of the scapula. Depression and protraction. Pec minor.
Remember, pec minor is his shoulder girdle muscle. So he'll have, if he asks a question, a muscle could be working, but if he says, what shoulder girdle muscle, make sure you don't give a shoulder joint.
You'll see national exams will do this. I'll ask a question like that. You know, what's working in the shoulder girdle area? And I may give you muscles in the shoulder joint area or elbow joint area that are working. And you know they're working. I might say, you're doing a flat bench press. What's working in the shoulder girdle area? And I give you a choice like anterior deltoid, pectoralis major, triceps. Do they work? You bet they work. They work in the shoulder joint and the elbow joint area. But I asked for what? The shoulder girdle area. So we put that down as a choice, and a lot of you jump on it because you say, I know when you do a bench press, you're working chest, pec major. I know you're working anterior deltoid. I know you're working tricep. If If you answer those, you get the question wrong. Because the question says, what's working in the shoulder girdle area? You go out to your average instructor in the field today and ask them, what are shoulder girdle muscles? They have no idea what you're talking about. They don't know what the shoulder girdle area is. And we see it over and over again. We go out and I look at people with these various certifications, personal training certifications, and you ask them about the shoulder girdle, they do not know what the shoulder girdle area is. So, dips, do I do elbow extension? Yes, I do. What about a pullover exercise? Remember you said you're in that position and you're doing extension of the shoulder joint. I'm not doing extension of the elbow joint, but I'm doing extension of the shoulder joint. So what's working in the triceps there? The long head is working. Long head. If I'm doing push-ups, extension, elbow joint. Bench presses, shoulder press, tricep press. See, some people may have their elbows in, they're doing a tricep press down exercise. French press, you see that? You know what a French press is? You got a dumbbell here? You're doing a French press. Now, what would be the advantage of a French press?
Isolated?
Yes, you got that long head on stretch.
On stretch. In fact, you'll notice if you go into gyms today, a lot of the tricep machines, you notice you'll sit down and you put your elbow up on a pad. You grab a handle and you're doing that. They put you in a position of shoulder joint flexion. Well, the long head of the tricep is an elbow extension. So if I put myself in shoulder flexion, I have taken that muscle and I put it on stretch, like a rubber band. Stretch it, get a more forceful contraction out of it. So there's a reason why they'll do that.
Excuse me, you heard what he just said, and we'll go over this a lot more, but just kind of keep this in the back of your mind. You're going to get a more forceful contraction when you put a muscle on stretch. We're not saying overstretch, but when you put a muscle on stretch, you'll get a more forceful contraction, which is a great example right there. We'll go over that again more.
Tricep kickback. See people that have got a dumbbell? Usually you support yourself with one hand, the other leg, and you're just doing this. Now, my long head of the tricep has some involvement, not only in extension of the elbow joint, but also it's sort of holding, it's stabilizing the shoulder joint. What other muscles are involved with stabilization when I do this exercise? I'm doing a tricep kickback. What's working in the shoulder girdle area? Wouldn't that weight want to force me into protraction?
Rhomboid.
Rhomboids,
Rhomboids.
traps. What's working in the shoulder joint area besides the long head of the tricep?
Lower
Wouldn't the weight want to force me into flexion of the shoulder joint? So what muscles are involved with extension of the shoulder joint? Lats and posterior deltoids. See, this is also fair game when it comes to finding out whether you understand the muscular system. Not only what's working, everybody knows, well, it's got to be the tricep because we call it a tricep kickback. Okay? A lot of other muscles working there. A lot of other muscles. So here's a typical tricep press down and push down exercise. You ever watch people in the gym do it this way? What happens if you lose control of the bar?
Right in the nose.
Okay, you eat it. So make sure, you've got to think about this when you do a lot of exercises. What happens if we lose control of the bar? What happens? This is an isolation exercise basically for the tricep. Now, what position is he in with the shoulder joint here? What position am I in with the shoulder joint? Flexion. So, okay. If I'm in flexion, what have I done to the long head of the tricep? Stretch. I put it on stretch. Just like when you sit down on these tricep machines, you're in flexion. Tricep press. Of course, the bar comes down, it hits you right in the skull, so they also call it what? Skull crusher. Skull crusher.
Is there a difference in the grip? What head is going to work with this?
Well, the difference is muscles involved with stabilizing the wrist joint. Because has it changed the position of the tricep? This way or this way?
No.
No. Doesn't. But I put the long head on stretch.
I
Tricep
think
extension.
sometimes we pass a little. Is that okay? If you use the, take a curved bar and then we pass a little.
Yes, you might even, because if I go further back, I put the long head on even more stretch. On more stretch. More stretch. Tricep press. Here we see an overhead press. I'm extending the elbow joint against resistance. You've got to use the triceps. Notice we have a couple of different handles there. If I grab these handles, a little bit difference in the range of motion, would it be? This versus this. Definitely an overhead press. If I'm using that pronated grip, but if you do the neutral grip there, almost becomes like a very high incline press, doesn't it? High incline press. You'll find from the standpoint of the shoulder joint it's more comfortable. You may start people here and then later on get them back here where they're more of that lateral rotation. Lateral rotation of the shoulder joint. Overhead press. Okay, we're going to stop there. We're going to pick up the pronator teres and quadratus on Wednesday.
You
Go
guys,
home, get your belts out, practice with your belts.
you guys should please keep up with the reading and make sure you go over and review this and keep up with your review questions at the end of the chapter. Don't wait till a week before the exam. So you don't want to wait till the last minute. Also, you know, if you think you need to get together with other students in here that are really getting to help each other, that's great. If you need to have a tutor, you know, especially if you miss a class, and don't wait to call. But this is so important because this is the major part of using the body, finding what muscles working, how it's working.